School Committee workshop meeting on Thursday, December 19th to order. We'll do an introduction to members.
Steve Tringali from Millville.
Mike Buckley from Blackstone.
Brian Faulkner, Millville.
Diane Robin, Blackstone.
Wendy Greenstein, Blackstone.
Dr. Perry Davis, Superintendent of Schools.
And Bill Chaplin from Blackstone. Can we do the pledge? We'll all stand for the pledge. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to introduce Dr. Bettman.
I'd also like to introduce Dr. Betancourt, who is here as our consultant on the Superintendent Search Committee. He's right here. And then we'll begin. So our first item, Perry, is...
To work on the position description, Dr. Betancourt had given you a packet and had summarized the survey results, and also had included in that a successful candidate profile. So those documents, and I don't know, Dr. Betancourt, if you want to kind of summarize the survey results.
Be happy
Quite
to do
detailed, but
Sure. Do you
might
all
be
have
helpful.
a copy of it, by the way? Hard copy?
I don't have one. Oh, this is it? Thank you.
Repaired, okay.
I've got mine.
You all set? You have-
Yep.
You're all set?
This is it, right?
Yes. You recall that one of the ways, in which, actually, two ways in which you asked us to seek input from your community in the generic sense, including teachers, parents, other officials, was to help you post a web-based questionnaire, which we did for you, or which we gave you the link to, and then those responses came to us. And in addition to that, Carolyn Burke was given a list of contacts that you wished us to speak with in terms of what they thought about the qualities, characteristics, skills and experience that folks thought would be beneficial in a new superintendent, and also the tasks and challenges that this new superintendent should attend to in the first 6 to 12 months on the job. So having done that, and this document, and frankly the community outreach work that we've done was done almost entirely by Carolyn Burke, who just is an expert in that area and is really, I think, very good at teasing out details and what people are saying. So the document that you have in front of you remains a working draft until you adopt it in some form or approve it or embrace it in whatever form is comfortable for you. The first section of the document that I've given you represents a candidate profile as Carolyn and I sort of looked at the data and teased it out. That does not mean that this is the profile that you will ultimately endorse, because you may want changes or you may want it to look different. But as we were looking at this at the input, there were some things that jumped out at us as the sort of the common themes that you might consider as you're looking at candidates for your superintendent position, and sort of measuring the candidates that you see in the process of reviewing them against the profile that you ultimately endorse. The response to your survey, I thought, was remarkably good. There were over 100 responses. I think there were 108 to be exact. And I'm not sure of the number of folks that were interviewed. I should have brought that number with me, but I think it was close to 20, I'm pretty sure, in that 15 to 20 range. So what you see here in the first section 1 is the candidate profile. What you see in section 2 are the actual comments that were made in response to the prompts, the 2 prompts that we developed and put out to the community. And you can see what we prefer to do is to take these and actually by hand split them out so that you can see the prompts as they relate to each of your constituency groups, rather than give you the sort of the hash that you get when you just download it, because it's very difficult to make any sense out of that way. So that, in essence, is what you have in front of you. I would suggest to you that if the document looks good to you in its present state, that's fine. If there are changes that you would like us to build in, that's also fine. You'll note that the narrative of the document states clearly that this is your document and not ours. We're submitting it to you, but the work we've done on your behalf, so it is your work. It becomes your document. We would suggest to you that either the Section 1, the successful candidate profile, or in fact the entire document might reside on your website at some point so that the community could see what you've accumulated, and so candidates can see as well, you know, what you might be looking for in your next leader. So I thought the community was very responsive, and I think the document says a lot about what folks think about the next superintendent of schools. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Comments, questions from the committee?
Is there anything particular that the people at home should know really jumped out in the survey?
I think what comes through to us is actually what we would expect, in that I think there's a lot of respect for the school system, and I think that what folks are looking for is a leader who listens and who builds an input process into the decision-making process for the schools. I think it's a school, I think it's a community that appreciates the ability to communicate with the administration in the district. And I think it reflects what I would think is a very healthy relationship between the folks that you're serving and you folks, in terms of your ability to listen and build their thoughts and their input into your decision-making process, is what I came out with.
Is there anything sort of unusual or unique that you came across that you haven't seen in other searches?
Actually, no. And that, to tell you the truth, that's a good thing. You will notice on page 4 of the profile, you know, the budgeting and finance issue is there. I mean, you can see that, but it's not jumping out as a, you know, as a problem, if you will. It's saying we would like you to be aware of that. But the collaborative piece is really what comes through. I say that there are no surprises, and that's a good thing, because what you look for in these things are the 1 or 2 things that jump out at you that you didn't expect. And if in fact that's happening, that can sort of get your attention in terms of why didn't we know that. But as I went through this, I didn't see anything that jumped out at me. And now, you knowing your district better than I, obviously, might see something that did surprise you. But I thought, all in all, what it reflected was a very positive relationship between your community and your schools.
So pages 3 and 4 is what you guys kind of summarized from all of the data you collected.
Yes.
Okay.
When you looked at the responses from the different demographics, what did you find? Was it pretty similar to other?
Yeah, I think it's what, again, there weren't any surprises. I think what, I guess what's remarkable is the positive, sort of the positive culture that I think you've created, which I think is a real plus.
Yeah.
That's what came out to me.
And there were enough from each group that you felt comfortable with the data they were providing?
Yeah, I can give you the breakout. You had, the spread was pretty good when you consider the size of the constituency groups. You had 26 teachers, which was 25% of the response. You had 11 support staff, which was about 10.5% of the response pattern. 4 administrators, which was about 4%. About 56% were parents, 58 parents in all, which I thought was good. I mean, because it takes time to put your thoughts down in this kind of of a questionnaire. It's not the kind where you just check things off. You really have to think, and that's what we wanted people to do. And then you had community members, which were about 5%, and then other who didn't identify. So a total of 108 in essentially that kind of pattern, which I thought was pretty good.
And so you feel that as part of the next steps moving forward, this should go up on the website to have other people look at it?
Well, I think it's something for you to consider. I think you folks have to handle it the way you're comfortable, but that's frequently what's done, and it's usually appreciated by the community, not only because they see what their thoughts meant and that they're respected, but it puts out there, what you're looking for. So yeah, you might want to consider that. And as I said, some people put up the whole document, others just the profile itself. Yeah. And in answer to the question, do we filter the responses at all? We only filter in terms of sort of the responses that wouldn't be considered necessarily appropriate, which there really weren't any. But folks who might say something that names a name or something like that. But that clearly wasn't a problem here.
Dr. Bettencourt, this would also be a document that, in your recruitment process, would be shared with potential candidates.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they would be seeing, if they make inquiries, this would be documentation that would be shared with them as well.
Now, if I may, I'd also suggest to you, I don't know where you are in your strategic planning process or your planning process if you're not calling it strategic. But the input in the back, the 15 or 20 pages of data can serve as a very nice baseline, a very nice starting point for your strategic planning process. Because obviously one of the first things you do in a strategic planning process is try to scan the environment to see what's out there. And this essentially represents a piece of an environmental scan for you before you actually get into that process. So it could come back as an important document for your new superintendent when he or she starts. The other thing that it is very good for is to build from this, build your entry plan. So a superintendent looking at this, in particular, the tasks and challenges, would, if I were a new superintendent coming in, I would say, here's what you've identified at the tasks and challenges. Can we talk about those? Can we talk about how you as a school committee see those? And are there things in particular that you want me to start working on right away so that we can begin to make headway right away? So I think it has several uses.
Any other comments, questions? Are people comfortable with the summary that Art came up with in terms of page 3 and 4 in the packet?
I think it's an excellent idea to put it on the website, too.
Yeah. The whole thing, or?
I'd say the whole thing.
Mhm.
I mean, if we're trying to be transparent
Yeah,
throughout,
absolutely.
I think,
There's no names or anything sort of
Right.
volatile
no, and those were all
about it.
teased out.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So people are fairly, they like page 3 and 4 as the main kind of document in terms of the recruiting and so forth. Brian, you good? Yeah, Mike?
Yeah, no, I think it should all go up there,
Okay.
especially the one that has 10 years of military experience.
I know, where'd that come from? Not that it's not a bad quality, it is.
It says the Army brat herself, right?
Air Force have,
Oh, I'm sorry.
But with your permission, what we would do is finalize the document. We'll do the final proofing, which is just, I noticed there are a couple of spacing errors that we'll pick up. And we'll put it out on stationery, send it to Perry perhaps as a PDF.
Mhm.
We're good to go, if you wish.
All right.
Do we have to vote? No?
No, we don't have to vote, do we?
The committee is aware that you have a separate pull-down on the school committee for superintendent search, so that's what it'll be on the website.
Okay. Next item.
Before you leave that item, I know the committee, these are characteristics, but the committee also should probably have some more discussion about the job description, because I think we've talked about it. You have this issue of the financial is in here, but under the current situation, the expectation of your current, superintendent position is much more than just leading but actually managing the financial piece. And that's why the other one is looking at the assistant superintendents, because I think what Dr. Bettencourt has presented, you certainly want an educational leader that is viable around finance, but ultimately, there needs to be someone who's actually responsible for but we don't have a business manager per se, so therefore, whether it's in the superintendent's or it's in the assistants, but it's your practice. You just need to clarify that. Where do you want to go with it?
So where do we want to go with that? Let's open that up for discussion. I know that's been something that we've gone back and forth about.
Well, I gave everyone a packet of some sample superintendent job descriptions that we can look at and kind of determine what are we looking at for superintendent, what are we looking at for assistant superintendent. And there might be, I mean, this is certainly not complete, but
But wasn't the main factor around finance?
For what?
Where was that going to land?
Where was that gonna
Where was
lie?
that going to land? I think we
Absolutely.
got to cover that first, then the other pieces will come into play, so.
Well, I'll give you a quick history lesson. Fortunately, we have a man with regional experience presently, so he understands, and that's a unique set of skills that you're not going to find everywhere. 1988 to 2001, the assistant superintendent was the finance person. When Mr. Harden became the superintendent, he took the finance role with him, and Mr. Campbell, who was in the assistant superintendent's role, was more in the curriculum space, but we also had Paulina Leah Adams, who was doing curriculum at secondary level, and then a couple of different people, including Ann Signoli, and I'm not sure who else, on the elementary level doing the curriculum piece. So when Dale Hanley, who was the curriculum person under Aldo, left, they elected not to fill that and to fill it with this split position. So Pauline still taught AP Bio and did secondary level stuff. Now that was probably 2 years prior to this place opening. So the expertise that Fred had developed, which was really off of green bar paper and 3-ring notebooks in 1988, when it was all done by hand, was something that he owned without any official blessing or anything like that. So he did that for, like I said, close to 20 years. Now, as things have evolved, you might not find someone that maybe has the top dog status or whatever. He's got to know the budget. He or she's got to know the budget. There's no question. Maybe they're not responsible day to day, but they're going to be the guys that are going to answer for it. Okay, Aldo still answered for it, even though Fred did all the work. I mean, they were a very good team at the time. And what that freed Aldo up to be able to do is more in the curriculum side, as well as building this building, adding on to AFM, JFK actually, that little 3 or 4 room addition. Having said that, what do you want to do? I mean, I see 3 components of this: curriculum, leadership, and finance. And everything else kind of is, in my simple thought, is somewhat less. Facilities is somewhat of a less position, transportation somewhat of a less position, whatever. So, do we cast our net looking for someone with finance who doesn't have the curriculum, and then we hope that the number 2 person's the curriculum, or do we leave that a little bit open? I don't know. Do we need, if the superintendent of schools is going to also drive the curriculum, do we need an assistant superintendent for finance and HR? Or do we need a business manager, a certified business manager, to run the business operation? And would a business manager be easier to find than an assistant superintendent? Are we paying too much for an assistant superintendent to do finance, or are we paying too much for a superintendent to do just the finance? I mean, those are kind of questions that I have, that I just throw out there tonight just to see if, what I have no answers, but this is how I envision this whole thing.
I know that finance is going to be very, very important to us. I would hate to get somebody in, look at a superintendent candidate and turn he or she away because they don't have that component, when we know we still have that opportunity to fill it through the assistant. Like if we had an assistant sitting here that did not have that, then absolutely you gotta go and you gotta have that. But it's kind of open right now. If you had the perfect candidate that didn't have that was certainly capable of overseeing, we still could plug it in as an assistant. So I don't want to, I hate to limit ourselves by putting it into the job description and saying you absolutely have to have this, and then, because I think in this situation, our number one priority should be the leadership role. And being able to lead in a compassionate and knowledgeable way. And then curriculum and finance can find their place. Not that they're less important, but if you don't get that leader that people are going to follow, it doesn't matter how well he or she's going to run the budget.
I agree with you on the leadership, that has to be number one. But I think the focus, when you look through the answers in here, I don't know how many of them I looked at, said budget, fiscal, you look through it, because it's all throughout all different demographies. It's all in there. I think the expectation from everybody who responded to this is that the person in that position owns the budget. And I think with the scrutiny that we've had over the last few years, and the challenges that both towns have had, the buck stops here. I think that the expectation is going to be that the superintendent of schools is going to be responsible for that. And when I look at the assistant superintendent's role, I think more operational. I think that role is more involved in the things that were just mentioned: the buses, the facilities, the day-to-day operations of the schools. That person needs to be the go-to person, because the expectation is that the superintendent is going to be well ingrained in, my expectation anyway, well ingrained in the budget, making sure that the nickels and dimes are going to equal out to where they need to be. And I think that's been a real gap that we've had.
Yeah, I'd echo that. I'd say the leader needs to control the money, or be responsible for the money, and they're the face of the district in terms of relating to the towns and things like that. I view the assistant more as closer to what goes on day to day and more interacting with the principals and students and teachers and all that. Actually, could we throw that to you? Does that fit in line with what you've seen in the past, a district of our size, and how do the roles kind of break out in what you've seen?
Well, I'm not expressing any particular expertise in that, only.
But you've done more of this than we have, so
Well,
that's why I'm trying to
and
pick your
Perry
brain.
Perry is well versed in this as well. Well, let me start by saying that one of the places where you don't want things to go wrong is with your money, is with your finance, is your budget. So, however you set yourselves up in terms of your structure, I think you owe it to yourselves as the overseers of the district, so to speak, to ensure that you're comfortable with the way that structure takes care of your budget. And I think, because ultimately you're going to have to answer the questions as to, if things go awry, they come back to you. So I think you folks need to think about what structure puts in, or what kind of structure do you put in place to be sure that you're meeting your responsibilities in terms of taking care of the public's money. So I would start there. In terms of the search, I think that if you include day-to-day budgetary responsibility as part of the job description of the superintendent, you're likely to narrow your applicant pool. Not in terms of ultimately those that will apply, because the response has been good, but in terms of those that you might actually consider. Because a lot of superintendents view their role as instructional leader and not directly in in charge of the day-to-day operational piece of the budget. There are those folks out there, and some feel very comfortable in that role. But it will tend, I think, to limit the kinds of folks that you will want to talk to. That's not to say that it's not the right way to go, but I think that it can have that impact. It's not atypical. In fact, the school system that I ran 10 years ago has an assistant superintendent in charge of finance and human resources. From my perspective, that seems to work well. There's a lot of expertise in this person at the budgetary level. He has a small staff that carries out that role very well. So that the leadership role and the curriculum role falls more to the superintendent. But it's not the only model. So I think, but ultimately, I think it all comes back to you as a school committee asking yourselves, what do we need in the structure, in terms of the way we create the structure here? What do we need to feel that we are, in fact, meeting our obligation to take care of the public's money? I think that's what it all boils down to.
If I may,
I'm
sorry.
Based on what you had just said, and actually what I'm hearing from the rest of the committee, I have a question. When you said the assistant superintendent it's not atypical for an assistant superintendent to run budget or operational. Was that from, or in your experience, is that from a larger town or a smaller town? Do you see a difference in the job descriptions of a superintendent and assistant superintendent based on the size of the town?
All right, well, the system that I ran was not a regional system, so there's that, I think, piece. But it was a school system of just under 3,000 kids. Yeah.
Good.
Again, the committee's well aware of it. We are very, very, very fortunate to have a support staff, and particularly an office manager, who's a very good accountant. The Budget Sense program and the detail, because we're a regional district, we have to balance our own bank statements, and we have to worry about our cash flow. You have somebody in place that does that exceptionally well. And as the person who was here as the interim, I just ask the questions, and Donna Scungio really carries it out. So there is somebody in place to do that aspect of the operational budget piece. So that's a strong piece. So but I raise this issue only because you just have to have clarity around it, because I agree with what Dr. Betancourt said, and actually Brian said it. When you looked at all of the comments, finance was mentioned quite frequently. So it is important, I think, to acknowledge it, but I think it's also, you don't want to leverage out a superintendent candidate, because that's not a strong area, but it leverages in, when we do the job description for assistant, we may want to leverage in some more finance pieces to that, all right?
I'd hate to narrow the pool.
Exactly.
By saying, oh, you're going to be a finance guy. Because really what we're hiring here is an educational leader. So we need that person out front. We need that person up at the town meeting. We need that person interfacing with parents and staff and the community. So we need a really well-rounded person and hopefully a good staff around him or her that will meet that. And Dr. Davis is right. We are fortunate there that the mechanics and all the pieces are still moving in the finance area, and that's probably been probably one of the saving graces. Imagine if you didn't have that in place. So you can almost take a little bit of a pass on the finance. He's going to have to obviously know a budget. He's going to know Chapter 70. He or she is going to know the rules and the regs when it comes to a Massachusetts budget. It'd be great if you found a person that had some regional experience. It's probably it's probably a bit of a stretch, but and then the other side of that is that if you really want the number 2 person to be operational, then money is really what makes that operation run. So that person would have to know, that would probably be kind of a natural fit with that.
Man, I like the idea. I like all the comments and you know, what you said, Mike, around there was an effective team, you know, when those two people were here. They worked well together. That's really important, no matter where we lie these roles. But I agree. I'm nervous about, I don't want to limit the pool, or the viewing of the pool.
Well, see, back in the day, it was Andy Sipowicz, which would have been Fred, and then his partner, which was Jimmy Smits or whatever, because he was the good cop and Fred was the bad cop. So Aldo would say yes, and then Fred would say no. Worked out well, 20 years or so.
I mean, I do think we need someone who, I mean, if you look at the first couple of things, community builder, educational leader, we need that kind of all-purpose kind of person at the top. And then hopefully there's going to be a financial infrastructure in place that they can come in, and whether it's the head person or the assistant, you know, that knows it. I mean, it intrigued me that I never even really thought of, should we hire a business manager instead of an assistant superintendent? I never really thought of that. That kind of
maybe narrows it too much in some of the roles we want them to fill, you know, on the operational side.
Right.
You know, maybe a bigger district can afford to do that, but not too much yet.
I would weigh in and say, I think you'd be better off with an assistant superintendent, somebody with a broader skill set, simply because you have somebody that can really hold up a lot of the business piece. You know, the mechanical piece, the accounting piece, the auditing piece. I mean, when I say Donna's books are squeaky clean. That's so important in a regional district, that she attends to those. She's balancing your checking accounts. She's monitoring our cash flow. She's monitoring our disbursements in Chapter 78 coming from the state. I get all of that financial stuff, and she's got it. And that's critically what a business manager would be doing, with support staff. But I think that's pieces covered. The generic assistant superintendent, with some oversight of that, but that could also free that person up to also work with the superintendent to carry out some other items on that agenda. It could be technology, you know, it could be you know, working on capital improvements with an educational focus. It gives the superintendent a stronger leadership team. You don't need to backfill the pieces that are already in place. And I would give you that direction. Because most business managers do not have educational leadership experience. They are good business people. Their degree is supposed to be in business accounting. It's the rare one that actually was a teacher and became a business manager. For the most part, they came out of the business sector, and they can process that stuff. But I think your team needs to be balanced and give that person. But I agree, it's a team. It's just making sure that you get the right two people in the team.
Okay, so with all of that, how do we want to move forward? I mean, I thought I heard a lot of, you know, we don't want to narrow the pool.
We don't want to narrow, but we can also, you know, if we do a little more generic job description at this point, when we're interviewing, we can be very specific in rating certain areas. And we might find we do get somebody that does, you know, that knows the budget inside and out. And then, and I think it's kind of a weighting thing of, how, you know, what comes first. And then again, we still have that assistant superintendent that we can look to complement the superintendent.
I will ask Dr. Betancourt, you really do need a position description to give a candidate who's inquiring. So,
Well, you do.
in a generic way.
Yeah,
So,
and I think perhaps it's coming out of this discussion. The other thing that just occurs to me that I would just suggest to you is that when you hire your new person may weigh in terms of how he or she would like to see the thing organized too, based upon his or her own knowledge of his or her own skills. So there's that piece, because that's part of the job of being the CEO, is putting things together in a way that works. So assuming that you're looking to this person for guidance, he or she could be helpful as well.
I think it sounds from what everybody's saying that we're really looking for that leadership. I think that's the key thing in the whole description, is having that leadership who will then take on and distribute what he or she thinks is going to be the best way to run the district. Because, I mean, I think they're all gonna know how to do a budget in some sense, and we have Donna, who does do an excellent job with the books. So, you know, along with the budget, has to be the curriculum, so the budget has to be, you know, that goes hand in hand. And so does pretty much anything else that all falls under budget. So if there's a good leader that can take that and separate it where it needs to be, I think what I'm hearing is the leadership role is what we're really looking for in that.
Right. I mean, if you look under Hadley's job description in the packet, you know, it does a good job at breaking down different sections. And if you look at their financial management section, on section D, I mean, all those things, I think, are important for the superintendent to have. And it doesn't say you have to have an MBA here. It just says that you some demonstration of ability to perform effective financial forecasting, long and short-term financial planning, supervises the preparation and presentation of annual budget, clearly explains the proposed budget, ensures financial procedures, accounts, so on and so forth. And, you know, that little section right there really could cover us in terms of a kind of more vanilla job description, you know, in that area. I mean, all the other areas are fine too. But that right there really does cover, you know, kind of what we're looking for, at least plant the seed in terms of someone that we're looking for. Other thoughts from people?
Yeah, I think as far as the budget, building the budget, and that financial acumen, I want to look for someone who has a more collaborative approach than we've had in the past.
Oh, yeah.
So we can do grounds-up approach to budgeting.
I mean, that was
versus-
all over this thing too,
Yeah.
collaboration in terms
Yeah.
of transparency. So how do we want to proceed in terms of the actual position description? Are we creating that right now, or how are we?
I think you need a direction, perhaps a suggestion, Dr. Bettencourt. Members, the two people on the screening committee, working with Dr. Bettencourt, could draft something up, because I do think it's an important recruitment document, and it also will help the screening committee to say, you know, these are, you know, our basic, this is what we're saying as the qualifications and responsibilities that we're looking for. Again, they don't have to be written in specific detail, but it's kind of broad. And you will never find a candidate, I don't burst any bubble, that's going to be perfect in everything. It is going to be a balance.
We found you, Perry.
We found, I know.
I'm an interim and I leave, so.
When did we clone?
So,
Cloning?
yeah,
Cloning?
yeah. Mhm. But the reality is, you know, I think, you know, for the purposes here this evening, Mr. Chairman, I think there's been enough reported in the NESDEC profile, along with some of the other documents, that empower your two school committee members to draft something up and just to get it to Dr. Bettencourt. Because in the recruitment process, people are going to kind of look for that.
Okay.
All
Did
right.
everybody look at Hadley's? Because I like how it's broken out
Yeah, me too.
in categories. And when we're kind of coming up with something, we can kind of try to get that category.
Is it too long, though? mean,
I think it's long. I do think it's long, but,
But I'm wondering if they built this based on a survey, because it looks like it's set up based kind of like they obviously looked at a survey, break the way that it's broken down and the way that the,
Hopkinton's
description.
isn't bad, too. That's
What?
broken down,
Hopkins?
but not as lengthy.
Correct.
They've done the same thing without doing the headings.
Yes,
Oh, I see.
yeah.
So the committee feels comfortable in terms of, you know, putting that with Diane and Erin and shooting us a draft and working with Dr. Bettencourt, is that?
What's our time frame for getting this done?
People are inquiring now about the position, so I think it's pretty quick. Short.
Tomorrow good for you?
Tomorrow?
How about tonight?
Shouldn't take too
December
long.
26th?
Shouldn't take too long. Yeah, it's 26th is good.
The position closes on?
January 10th.
Yeah.
And we're beginning to talk to candidates now.
I'm open, so I can, you know.
I think we.
Just call me or shoot me an email,
Okay.
and we can work it through, I'm sure.
All right, next item is superintendent salary range. I'm going to open that up for discussion.
Didn't we last year discuss or look at other towns, surrounding towns?
Well, I took a look at several districts that are open presently, just to get an idea. For example, the Westboro superintendent just announced their retirement. They have a population of about 3,600, their budget's 42.7 million, and the range is 160 to 180. Obviously, Westboro is a much more affluent community and very well known for its educational programs. One of Bill's towns is also looking, Rentham, K6, 1,151 kids, $10 million budget, 130 to 140. Kind of interesting that probably between the three, just the K6 and three towns, they're spending over $500,000 in salary probably, just for superintendent. Wachusett just filled theirs with an internal candidate, I believe. There are 7,500 kids, $80 million budget, and the range is 150 to 180. Dayton Rehoboth is out looking again because Kathy Montagano retired. That's a K-12, 3,000 kids, 35.1 million, and they're in the 135 to 155 range. They're in southeastern Mass. And a neighboring community fairly close by, Freetown Lakeview, which is a K-12 that kind of splits. One town's in Plymouth County, one town's in Bristol County.
Is that Lakeville, you said? Lakeville?
Lakeville,
Freetown Lakeville.
24?
Yeah, Freetown Lakehead.
Down near Middleborough.
24?
Yes.
3,000 kids, $32.7 million operating budget, and their range is listed as competitive.
What's Northbridge listed as?
I'm
Oh, you
getting
get there.
it.
I
I'm
thought you were
getting
done.
it.
I thought you were done.
Dedham is a K-12 in town district, 2,800 kids, $35 million budget. No salary was listed. I couldn't find it anyway.
We're doing that search. They're
I
dealing
saw
with
your
that
name
now.
on a couple of those sheets that I was reading.
That's
You're a pretty popular guy there, Dr. Bettner. Northampton is a K-12, 2740, Western Mass, $38 million budget, also no range listed.
That actually has changed. Northampton is now 140 to 150.
Okay.
We're doing that search too.
Northbridge is a K-12, 2,600 population, so a little bit big, quite a bit bigger now than us. Often, lots of times, several years ago, we would use some comparisons because our budgets were fairly close with our numbers, but they've expanded. We haven't. Their budget's 25.1 million, and the range is 130 to 145. Plus, you have to buy the assistant principal at Balmer a coffee every day.
At least.
130 to 145?
Uh,
About the bridge.
Northbridge.
And the other one that I found was Randolph, which is K-12, 3,000 kids, $50 million budget, and range is competitive. Obviously, South Shore, kind of bounded by Quincy and Milton. Route 24 runs smack dab through it. So those are the ones that I could find yesterday. Just to give you an idea, really, no one really lines up and says, "Oh, gee, this is we're kind of the smaller of the several that I listed." However, I think it's important that, in the same vein, as far as leadership goes, that we don't sell ourselves short, that we don't take a potential candidate out of this because we're too low. And people in the communities will say, "Well, gee, she's going to spend a lot of money for a superintendent." Well, we don't want to keep doing this. We'd like to hopefully, at least this committee member's point of view, and I'm only 12% of the voting block here. I'd like to be able to say we did this, we got a quality candidate, and we built a staff or an opportunity around him or her to drive this district forward. So instead of setting our expectations too low, I'd like to see us maybe look above the trees a little bit. So that, okay, what would take that person that maybe is in the running for Westboro, I'll use that one as an example, and I know that's kind of high, would even entertain putting an application in here? What person might look at Northbridge and say, I think I'd really like to go to Blackstone Millville. There's more opportunity there, there's a brighter future there. So I really think that it's important that we paint that strategy. And people probably with doctorates, they're either assistant superintendents or superintendents elsewhere or even principals of buildings, are probably in that 140 range in some of these towns. That's really the crux of it. Now, I know the Mendon Upton guy is about $1.50, give or take. I think they just renewed him, or he's in his second 3-year. He has a doctorate. I don't know what Milford's making. I wanted to call Dan Ranieri today to see what Bellingham was at, because Bellingham's a little bit about the same size, and they're struggling with, reduced enrollment and things of that nature. So that's just, this was like about a half an hour's worth of work I just did yesterday.
For me personally, I don't think we can afford to be a stepping stone any longer if we want our district to be solid. We can't take any more people in that are on the learning curve on the way up. We need somebody who's been there, who's done it, and can transform.
This district had a unique situation that it had 3 superintendents from 1970 to 2003. Okay, and the 3rd superintendent was the assistant superintendent to the first 2. That's unheard of today. You're right, though. I don't want to see 3 and go. I don't want to sign, Jacoby Ellsbury for $150 million for a couple of years and have him look elsewhere. I really don't. I really want to say that a kid that's in the 7th or 8th grade might actually shake this person's hand when he walks across the stage at graduation. Wouldn't that be kind of cool? I know maybe I probably live in a Shangri-La.
What is the average tenure nowadays?
I think it's 3, right?
It's under 5 years.
Under 5?
And again, the longevity would be nice and the consistency would be nice, but I think it's more the experience. I think even if we didn't have somebody here for 10, 15 years, if they came in knowing what they were doing, that would be a great help as opposed to learning on the job. Hasn't worked for us in a little while. And I don't think we can afford to do that learning curve any longer.
Okay, throw out some numbers, people.
Well, just in
Hear a
those
lot
6
of
towns,
words.
there's a
Well,
range of
looking at-
130 to 180 for
Right,
those
rent-
6 towns that you just
My
brought up.
personally,
Rehoboth, Northbridge.
my suggestion, or what I would recommend, is make 145 to 165.
I think 165 is at the very high end.
High end.
Perry?
Now, I was thinking 145 to 155.
Me too,
and-
yeah.
But
We can throw 165 out there and see.
If we have a candidate out there, what was Northbridge again? I'm sorry, 130.
130 to 145.
Yeah, which seems like a decent range.
But we don't, I'm afraid,
They're the most comparable in terms of dollars. I mean, $25 million budget, we're like 22.
if we put it too high, will we get some crazies, though?
Budget-wise.
Say again?
Similar.
If we put it too high, will we get some crazies coming out of the woodwork?
No,
Well, if
that
you
could
put-
happen no matter what.
But if you put it too high, are we going to limit ourselves for the assistant superintendency too? Because then,
Well, I think we're
Take
throwing,
it- I
don't
I
wanna
think
get
we're throwing
into
a
that.
range out there,
right,
you know.
Just
I
for
mean-
your information, your current superintendent's salary in this year's budget was 137. That's where you were, all right? So your current FY14 budget was at 137.
Yeah, and there had been no salary adjustment for, there probably would have been some kind of adjustment post-July 1.
Yeah. So I think you're at the 140 number. The question is, where do you need to be?
I think the 180s are outliers, because you get 2 out of 6 that are 180.
I don't think we're.
150
their
150 to 180 is
budget's
a,
twice ours.
150 to 180, that's a pretty big range.
Well, and their budget's
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
twice
big
what ours
budgets,
is.
so, I mean, if we say 140 as a starting point, what's usually the range? Is it 10 or is it 20 or
10, 15, usually.
15?
140 to 155, numbers like that.
Well, I don't want to help you land on a number, because that's not really appropriate for
Okay,
me,
well,
but I think the discussion is going in the right
Well,
direction.
let's look at it this way. Okay, if the former superintendent stayed, and that person was able to negotiate some type of raise, we'd be over 140. We'd be
And there was
north
some
of
other things
140.
built in that contract where it was over 140. Let's be honest.
We would have been north of 140.
Yeah.
One way or the other. So if we go to 145 to 160, and what that is that we're beyond that, and quite frankly, because there's other districts in the valley that are are looking, I think we should set ourselves apart. Okay, and no disrespect to Northbridge or anything like that, but I really want to see, you know,
And I think that goes to what I think
I mean,
everybody's
if you
saying.
look around out now, you go to see your pal Michael there, he's probably,
Doesn't mean we're gonna
I'm not
do
even gonna
that.
think about that. What's the Sutton guy making? I don't know. Yeah. Carney's new.
Yep.
Douglas, is she retiring? But that could be an opening there.
So the question is, what's gonna set us out from the surrounding towns, because
If
we're
we
very
can we can
close.
kind of, we're a little north of Northbridge.
If we were 5 or 10 higher, we'd have the choice of the region.
If we come down to negotiations at that point. I mean,
Right, it's gonna
I don't
depend
know
on,
that
it's
it's
gonna
gonna.
come down to that.
Yeah, but you know what I mean, but
It's given the interest.
Like,
someone's
No,
sitting there and they're
I
saying,
don't disagree.
130 to 140, well, why should I, you know, the Northbridge budget's bigger, so I'll go there.
Right.
Okay, or, you know, maybe he has more, that person has more administration. And don't forget, we run things a little lean here. You know, it's not like we're gonna get, you know, you're not gonna have 4 administrative assistants and a chauffeur service. So, you also have to understand that. You know, I just think that it would just like, make that thing pop out, so that, okay, they're serious about this. Okay?
One
instead of
140 to
just looking at-
160.
Say again?
140 to 160.
Bill, what do you think?
I'm thinking 145 to 160.
I'd say either one of those are fine.
I think we're all in the same range. We're
145 to 160, that's
Yeah,
15,000.
and I can go to 165 too, if need be, but, I mean, that's the range. I don't think when people come in, they're looking to get the top anyways. But I think if we look at that range and we have that range in mind, not that we might even hire at 165, but you gotta know it's coming.
Well, we're gonna see,
Within-
who's available at what range, you know,
Right.
we're gonna get a pool
Right.
that's this big versus this big.
Right.
So that affects the budget next year
Mhm.
by $15,000, $20,000. Okay.
Potentially, yeah. Mhm.
And then we gotta look at the assistant superintendent
high
that you're
end.
bringing along.
On the high end, yeah.
Do we know what Uxbridge is, or is that not on there?
I'm sorry?
Uxbridge?
He's new. I think he's probably in the,
He's probably in the lower end, because
I think, I want to say 130,
Who's that?
120, Oxbridge?
Uxbridge's guy.
I don't know, try to see if I can find it.
I'm going to guess it's like 130-ish. Maybe a little higher.
I say 145 to 165.
So we're there. I think
You
we're
know,
close
we're
enough.
there, but
And I think and it certainly will attract people with a track record as a superintendent. You're not necessarily, at that range, will we attract experienced superintendents as opposed to people just jumping in for the first time?
Well, they're probably coming out of something beyond the principalship. Probably, you know, a curriculum person, something of that level. I'll not be an existing superintendent coming for this. It would probably, I don't want to say down a tier, but, you know, the next level.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Again, I can just share with you what Glenn Kuchar said when he came and talked to you. There are basically 3 zones in Massachusetts. There's Eastern Mass, Central Mass, and Western Mass. The highest salaries are in Eastern Mass, and then Central Mass, and then you go out west, and the numbers drop, you know, dramatically. You know, there are superintendents in the western part of the state that are making about 100 to 110. It's just the nature of the.
It's probably like every
formula.
other industry in
Yeah,
the state,
exactly.
too.
So, you know, you can't compare yourself to what's going on inside 128, you know, in terms of superintendent salaries, but I think you've given yourself a competitive range, you know, in the, and as a community that I would say is on the border between both Western Mass and Eastern Mass. So you've got the ability to attract people maybe that are in Western Mass, good background, good experience. You know, come a little bit, you know, to the central part of the state, you know, attractive, and yet you're still reasonably competitive with people that may have central office experience in the eastern part of the state as it comes. So I think you're positioning yourself, you know, with that. But again, you need to kind of give Dr. Betancourt some direction, because I'm sure that's the first question candidates are asking. What's the salary range?
So can we say 145 to 165, or 145 to 160 at this point? What does the committee?
That's fine with me.
160, I'd prefer going a little higher, like
Go ahead.
160 or 165.
I like 165.
So 145 to 165?
165?
But 145, 999.
So are you authorizing, well, there are two questions, really. The first question is, we can now, if you wish, we can go back to the posting on our website, at least, and perhaps some others, and actually insert a salary range if you wish us to. Or we can leave the postings as they are, which says regionally competitive, and just talk to candidates in terms of your range. So,
I think we post it.
post it.
Yeah.
Is everyone in agreement?
Yeah, because we're regionally uncompetitive now.
Okay, so just so we're clear, you're authorizing us to post a salary range of 145 to 165,000?
Correct.
Now that you've done it, I would echo, may I? I would
Please.
echo what Perry has been saying to you, in that I think that is a nicely competitive salary range. And as Perry will tell you, there's another ranking of salaries. You get sort of one cadre of applications when you break 150, and then you get you sometimes get another cadre when you break 160, and even 165 can bring in another. So I think you've done well. I think that's a nicely attractive salary.
Okay, next item on the agenda is position description for assistant superintendent. I think,
Are we waiting on that now?
Can I just hold on a second? I just happened to do a little search here. And Air and Shirley are looking for a superintendent. Start July 1st, 2014. And some of the information that they had said, actually MASC is doing it. And let me just get to the good part. He looked at communities similar to A.S. Shirley based upon district size and ability to pay. He looked at Ashburn and Westminster, East Bridgewater, Ipswich, Millbury, and Uxbridge. In 2013, these districts would have around 2,100 students, so a little bit bigger than we are. And the average salary was 143, and the median was 145. The salary range for Gilbert termed major competitors in that cohort, if you will, was 132 to 170. So that was a average salary of 152. So we're in the ballpark, and we're a little bit smaller than that. But
I think Beverly just hired, that was 160 to 180, Beverly?
Beverly, yeah, that's probably 150.
That's, again,
That's
128 belt,
Beverly, yeah, that's what I was just.
Beverly.
That's a
I
city-
think-
that's a
I think
city
Steve
department.
Herschel was there
Right.
negotiating that.
Big budget up there.
It's crazy, because the mayor actually is the chairman, or member of the school committee, because.
The city,
way
yes, the
cities
city.
work.
Yeah, that's fairly common,
That's
actually.
common, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the position description for assistant superintendent, we're gonna wait a little bit. 'cause I don't
Are
think
we
have
gonna
to-
wait till we get the job description of the,
The super.
the rough draft of the,
And I think,
and then go from there?
I think
yeah, because I think even the superintendent that we choose
should be
should
engaged.
have
Some
some
input
input
into it,
into it.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
My only concern is that I know it has to be general, but I feel as though, we could possibly have two strong candidates, but two strong candidates with all similar, qualifications, and versus a balance, like one might be stronger in curriculum and one might be stronger with, budgetary and financial. So that's my only concern with keeping this very general in both sense, is that having both of them have the same skill set versus having a balance where one might be, that's my only concern with not having a.
Right. I think we're gonna hire one. We're gonna have one hired. Then we're gonna move to the number two and develop that in conjunction with that. So we'll know what that person is like in the number one, because he's already hired, or he or she's already hired. I think then we can develop the similar kind of search pool around, this is exactly what we're looking for. And we'll know better once we have this position filled. So I think it's gonna be general now. I don't think the second one's gonna be general. I think we're gonna have a
Right, yeah.
specific kind of framework of what that's gonna look like based on the hire. Right, does that make sense?
We'll look at the complements.
Yeah, they'll have to balance,
Right, right, balancing in there, absolutely,
yeah.
yeah.
We don't know what they're balancing yet.
And the team thing is a real thing, and I think it's real important to the success of the district. So I think including the superintendent, the next superintendent in that is going to be important and crucial. Anything else?
Just want to, on the next regular meeting on January 9th, our Millville roof project is going to the MSBA board at the end of January, but because of the regional agreement and notice, Mr. Gould and we will put on the agenda to actually take the vote to notify the towns. We don't have enough days. We have to do it because we have to notify MSBA within 90 days in order to get the clock ticking. So he and I both agreed the strategy would be to come to your January 9th meeting and get you to vote that we're going to incur debt for the Millville Elementary roof project, and so that we can notify Blackstone and Millville, because they have 60 days to do nothing or call a special town meeting for the purposes of that. So when we laid out the calendar, and in talking with our liaison at MSBA, this seems the most prudent strategy. I didn't want to spring that on you, but, we'll have all of the material in the packet.
We just have to notify Millville.
No, you have to notify both by your regional
Yeah.
agreement.
Oh, I see.
You have,
Even though
even
it's
though the
there.
debt is only going to be paid by
Okay.
Millville.
All right, so I just wanted that to be
Yeah.
clear for the TV,
Yeah,
that
no,
the debt's.
The regional agreement and the state law requires you to notify Blackstone, even though Blackstone will probably do nothing, which means they'll let the 60-day clock run out because it has no impact on them. The reality is, you still have to notify them.
Okay.
So that, I didn't want to have you get the packet and say, whoa, what's this? It's, when we had the phone conference yesterday with MSBA, we agreed that would be the strategy to do. So it'll be on your agenda for January 9th, pushing that for you, okay?
Anything else? Anything else, Barry?
No.
Then we will close this meeting. To adjourn.
Do we need a motion to adjourn?
You're in a
So
public
move,
meeting.
motion to adjourn.
Second?
Motion
Happy
made,
holidays.
seconded. Closed.